I welcome this opportunity to conclude the debate on my private member's motion M-422, which is meant to improve on the last post fund. I want to start by acknowledging certainly those colleagues who've spoken in support of this motion, recognizing the importance of it, not just to our veterans, but to their families and to all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Let me mention as well the very partisan remarks that were made earlier today by another member, the member for Durham. And I have no idea where that came from. In fact, I was astounded by some of the remarks. And let me say that this is far from a partisan issue. This is an issue that impacts on those who've given so much on behalf of all of us.
Hear, hear. Men
and women who've given the ultimate sacrifice. Men and women who've gone and fought in war since time immemorial. This is not the place to debate partisan politics and political issues when it comes to our veterans.
Yeah.
And I want to support the Royal Canadian Legion and acknowledge all the work the Legion has been doing on this particular file, their efforts to enhance the last post fund, their letter writing campaign that happened to coincide with the introduction of my private member's motion, Mr. Speaker. And they have worked so hard by writing to everyone they could possibly think of, by encouraging people to get involved in their letter writing campaign. The legions from coast to coast to coast have been writing to all members of Parliament, and my motion supports their efforts. It's meant to support the efforts of the Royal Canadian Legion. It's meant to support our veterans. So any suggestion that there's a partisan issue here or this is being done for political reasons is totally unfair. And I really take exception to it. But I don't want to waste any more time on it, Mr. Speaker, because that is not what this is about. This is about doing what's right. This is about recognizing what our veterans have done. And it's about ensuring that when they die, that they have a dignified burial and funeral. And that's the sole purpose of this motion. And I want to say thank you to the government for doing what it did in terms of increasing the amount available for a burial of a veteran from $3,600 to just over $7,000. I applaud the government for doing that. Unfortunately, they didn't consult the last post fund when they did that, because if they had, they would have realized that, of course, that is still too little. When you consider that someone who's serving today, if unfortunately they should get killed in the line of duty, they would in fact be entitled to about $14,000 for a funeral. So clearly the $7,000, while accepted and welcomed because it is double the amount that it existed prior to that, it certainly is not enough to cover the total cost of a funeral. And what happens in that case, Mr. Speaker, of course, is that we end up with families having to pick up the additional cost, families who can ill afford to do so. And I also know that in some cases we have funeral directors who will pick up the cost, knowing that the families cannot incur the additional hardship. And of course, most of these funeral directors, it's small business, and we're asking them to take out of their own pocket the added expenses to cover off the cost. So to suggest that the last post fund is working, it isn't, Mr. Speaker, and I point to the fact that, you know, we had over 66% of the applicants denied. Over 20,000 veterans were denied access to the last post fund. Let me conclude by putting a personal face on this issue, Mr. Speaker. M-422 is about veterans like Mr. Headley Lake from Fortune in my riding of Random Buren St. George's. He was born in 1918, and after growing up on the family farm, he joined the Royal Canadian Navy and served during World War II. When the ship he was on was hit by a torpedo in the middle of the night and sank, he found himself in the cold water of the Atlantic Ocean, clinging to a lifeboat for hours that was already filled to capacity. He soldiered on, and after being rescued, went back overseas to the shores of Normandy. Following Normandy, he volunteered to go to the Pacific, but was denied because he was deemed to have spent enough time on the front lines. Mr. Lake served the remainder of the war in Raleigh. Following the war, he married and continued to work on the farm, and worked, in fact, in a fish plant at night, and finally was able to build a home for his family. These are the types of individuals that this motion is about. These are our veterans, and I'm asking all members of the House of Commons to put aside any political partisanship and vote in support of 422 for our veterans and their families.